Welcome back to another segment of D.B. Cooper Through the Lens of Logic. So we've discussed all the elements of the Cooper paradox matrix, and now we are ready to put them together and find an optimal solution. Finding that solution is like setting up an equation to solve the data points. So we know all the data points, and now we're going to review them in this video so that we can solve. Eventually, what we want to do is create equations that are essentially lines that fit through the data points. And then we want to find the most optimal line or the most optimal equation, and that will be our solution. Sunny and right. Here we go. Make sure you're connected. The writing's on the wall. But if your mind's neglected, stumble you might fall, stumble you might fall. Stumble you might fall. Welcome back. I'm calling this video 5.5 facts, and the reason why is because actually the sixth fact is, I think it's pretty close to a fact, but you can't actually prove it and verify it without a lot of time, energy, and effort. And so that's why I'm calling this video 5.5 facts. It's based on the 6 elements of the Cooper paradox matrix. We're going to go through them one by one. So the first element is the landing zone. And I say it's known, and I use that term loosely. It's known to a degree. It's not known precisely where he landed, but it's known within a general geographic area and within a reasonable amount, within a couple miles. It's not off by 25 miles, 30 miles, 15 minutes, that kind of thing, like some people have postulated. So the original estimate isn't off by enough of a margin to really materially alter the solution, nor to open the possibility of natural transport, which is something that's pretty much been the accepted outcome, really. And I don't really see why we need to discuss this any further. If you disagree with this, then really we have nothing to discuss. Number 2, money found. We know where it was found, we know when it was found. We know what condition it was found. We know all these things. It gives lots of information, actually. If you do not presume that there's a paradox, there's no conflict between where he landed and where the money was found. If you actually want to start assuming that these two variables conflict with each other, and why would you do that? Because really you're trying to support a hypothesis that is unsupportable. We know that the money was effectively moved. At some point in time, the money moved from landing area to where the money was discovered at Tina's bar. So the question is, when was the money moved, where was the money moved to, and who moved the money? And all those things can be debated. But the fact that the money was actually moved, physically moved, cannot be debated. Sorry if you disagree with this. Again, we really have nothing more to discuss. Element number 3. 7 years passed before some ransom goes into the Columbia River. Alright, there's a reason where this comes from. I say here on the slide that this may not be known absolutely, but it can be safely concluded. This is known as an inference. It was Palmer's best estimate, and it's supported by the strata in the sand and the condition of the bills, which is actually another one of the elements, but we'll discuss that later. The third paradox supports Palmer's conclusion, and it's supported by the axioms we discussed in a previous video, the money and discovery axioms. They actually reinforce each other, and the money axiom states that the money is easier to find the day it shows up, and so therefore it favors a more recent money arrival. You see, because if the money showed up in 1971, it's actually easier to discover the money in 1971, yet it's not discovered until 1980. Now, the discovery axiom states that high traffic periods increase the probability of discovery because you're going to have high traffic periods in the summertime of each of those years where there's going to be a volume of people camping and digging in the sand and doing things such as Brian Ingram did, where they're trying to make a fire, gather firewood, and they're going to be walking and gathering around the beach fishing and just essentially moving around. So these high traffic periods are are periods of high probability to find the money, and yet so many of these go by before money is actually found. All these things basically reinforce each other. That's one way we know Palmer was actually right. The fourth and arguably speculative conclusion, element of the Cooper paradox matrix, is that the exposure of the cache was less than 8 years. And here's how I get that. Cache left outdoors in the winter, rainy season, think rain, not snow, would begin to mold and rot immediately. 8 years of rot would make the bills completely unreadable. The bills, though weathered, were readable. We know because they could actually be identified by the serial number. I mean, they were weathered, but they were still readable. Therefore, the cache was not outdoors the entire 8 years. There's no true way to test this other than to run several experiments, and it would be too expensive to do it. The FBI could have done it with the help of the Treasury Department, but they never did it. The fifth fact is the money did not travel down the Columbia in the original money bag. This is, again, is the third paradox we talked about in the last video. The money bag would have had to land and deposit the cash in the small area it was found. A wet 40-pound bag would remain on the beach longer than the individual stacks, and the reason is because of the time it takes to dry. The money bag was not found, and the stacks were found. Therefore, the money bag never landed at the beach, and it cannot be responsible for actually carrying the money down the river. If you disagree with this, watch the previous videos. Now, the sixth and final fact is discovered money must travel together. The 3 stacks of cash are found in this small little area, and nowhere else outside of that area are they found, even though the beaches are combed, even though people are searching up and down the Columbia River after this discovery. Nothing ever surfaces. It's only in this one little area. So the odds of 3 out of 100 stacks arriving independently into this 1 square foot area, and then the 97 out of 100 arriving no other place on the beach, are tiny, minuscule, because really at the very least they would have been scattered around, but they weren't. Therefore, the stacks did not travel independently. Contrapositive is that they traveled together. The question is, how did that happen? There was no rubber band found around all 3 stacks. Whatever it was, it wasn't apparent, it was gone. There are maybe some materials that could support such a finding. Lightweight materials that could float or blow away. Degradable, this is very important, degradable materials. They could degrade into nothing or degrade and then blow away or wash away. So we need something that's more degradable than the money, something that's lighter than the money. And so a solution would require some kind of decomposable or floatable method of bundling, assuming that the stacks themselves weren't somehow glued together, which I don't think they were. And I speculate here on this slide, potential materials could include, a rubber band or twine. The question there is, the rubber bands on the original stacks were still on the money. They crumbled to the touch. A larger rubber band surrounding all 3 bundles was not there, and twine would actually last longer than the rubber bands or the money, frankly. So that doesn't really make sense. A cardboard box might work. A paper sack would work. The cardboard box might be problematic in that it would need to be made of a very flimsy cardboard. Whatever it was must fit the criterion. So for example, a Ziploc bag, which were in existence at the time, does not fit because the cash would remain inside the Ziploc, and the Ziploc is less degradable than the cash. Bottom line is, whatever bundled the cash has to be more degradable than the money itself. So join me in the next video where we're going to start solving the crime.